guys? It's Ryan Fowler with the Inner Game Group. Tim is on a plane, and I'm not sure where Jordan is, so it is just me today. Might not be too long of a show today, but I really wanted to present this show on rigid versus flexible thinking. We have a clip by a lady who tells a really illustrative story from her life. When we do hypnosis, I do hypnosis. I have online programs, the free school community. If you want to check it out, there's people been curing their procrastination, their depression, anxiety, all sorts of stuff with the free program. Go right there. You join the community and then hit classroom. You can try it out for yourself. But in hypnosis, there's only really two things that keeps me from helping people, from them getting better. Number one is people can't feel their feelings. A subconscious program is a belief tied to a feeling. And if you're not connected to the feelings, you're not connected to the subconscious program we need to change. Number two is there are sometimes, again, this is a small percentage of the time, people who come to me are generally at a point where they're ready to change. That's why they've come to me. But there is a small percentage of people who want to stop their suffering, their feeling bad, their anxiety, their lack of self-belief, whatever. They want to stop that, but they don't want to let go of their belief systems. They have rigid mindsets. Rigid thinking has a lot of problems with it. And by the way, I was raised in a religion that has a lot of black and white rules. And furthermore, just, narcissistic personality disorder. Mom, very, very rigid thinking. It's actually a hallmark of people who are depressed, people who are overly anxious, and dysfunctional families have rigid roles for each family member. No matter what, you're the black sheep. No matter what, you're the golden child, etc. So I cannot help people who are not willing to change their belief systems. Furthermore, people with rigid mindsets are not mentally strong, because if you are not flexible, you don't adapt when new things happen to you, and you don't adapt and account for it, and you hold this rigid system, and the outside world does not align with that, it could break you. So we're going to watch this clip by this lady who gives this very good story. And welcome to the show, everyone. We have DBB here, Ryan Harrison, my man, Ryan Harrison. Ryan, you've come a long way. Thanks for showing up. DBB, thanks for showing up. So I'm going to play this clip. I may comment, a little here and there. I'll try and get through it without commenting too much. And then we'll further discuss. I want to point out, in our society, you see tons of rigid thinking all the time. So after I play the clip, I want to talk about that. And if you guys have any questions, put it in the chat. I'll answer your questions too. You can ask me questions about anything as usual. Yeah. So let's dive into it. Oops. Okay, here we go. So Rosanna Snee, and I really like her story and how she presents it. Here we go.
When I was a little girl, maybe about 7, 8 years old, something like that, probably closer to 7, we had a hurricane in Cuba, and everything was prepared. Things were put under leaks, and walls, windows were boarded up, and it was just sort of an exciting thing for little kids.
Right.
There's so much going on. Now,
Jordan, welcome.
Hey, sorry I'm
late. How you doing? Did you hear any of what I was talking about? Easy Smooth, welcome to the show, my man.
Go ahead.
Not much?
No,
okay.
I didn't hear anything.
So this lady, we're talking about rigid thinking versus flexible thinking. Rigid thinking causes a lot of dysfunction. It's a hallmark of depression. People are overly anxious. Dysfunctional families are very rigid. And you can have a pretty fragile mindset. You're not resilient when you're rigid. This lady, Rebecca Snee, she is telling a story that happened to her as a child. So we'll go back just a little bit. It's about her and a hurricane. And then we will keep going.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, here we go.
We had a hurricane in Cuba, and everything was prepared. Things were put under leaks, and walls, windows were boarded up, and it was just sort of an exciting thing for little kids because there was so much going on. Now, in our front yard, we had a little willowy, wispy tree that sat there, and across the street, catty corner, there was this big, gigantic, tall tree with a huge trunk, rigid trunk. So during the hurricane, I mean, things were happening. Trash cans were flying by, things were falling, papers were flying. It was pretty bad. And what ended up happening that the winds got very high, and our little tree, I could see it from the window, was just going like this and just flowing back and forth. The tree across the way cracked and fell in the middle of the street. It was just too rigid, didn't have a chance. And it is like that with our thinking. If we are too rigid in our thinking, we are going to crack. So what is rigid thinking? People who have rigid thinking are controlling, they're very inflexible, and they're very frustrated.
And they're usually not good to be around because they like to criticize you when you don't adhere to what they think is right. We'll keep going.
People with rigid thinking will not change their minds, even though all signs point to changing your mind. People with rigid thinking have an inability to see things from a different point of view. It has to be their point of view all the time. They basically have blinders on. And so rigidity causes anxiety because you can't change other people, and you want people to do everything you want done your way all the time, but that's not how the world works. So
I'll comment real quick. Rigid thinkers think the world should be this way, and then they try to get everything to fit into that worldview, as opposed to it's like a wave crashing against the rocks. The rocks aren't moving. You're the wave. You better be flexible. And if you're Jordan, have you noticed? I was telling people earlier, there's only a small percentage of people I can't help when I do a session. However, one of the two groups I cannot help are people who do not want to change their mindset. They're too rigid. Have you noticed that at all?
Yeah, and some of those clients, it depends on how rigid they are and why they're rigid.
True.
So if
everyone's a little rigid on some things,
Yeah, and so if they've got really strong, programs that are keeping them safe at, they don't want to change because change is, scary, or change is not going to keep them safe, then you have to you basically have to make them feel safe first, and then you can help them let those go. And so
yeah,
but it depends on but to a certain extent, if a client is so wound up in a certain belief, I don't want to say it's impossible, but it certainly requires it becomes a lot more difficult really, really quickly. And so, especially if they don't, or if they're nervous to talk about a certain subject because they have a lot of shame or a lot of around it. So I think as a hypnotherapist, part of our job is to make sure that they feel comfortable around us, that they can trust us,
Yeah, rigid thinking is a trauma response. People will adopt rigid beliefs because in their childhood, they adopt belief systems they think will keep them safe. But then later in life, those rigid belief systems cause them problem after problem after problem, and they're just not willing to let go. I would also say there are people out there that unnecessarily attach certain belief systems to their own self-worth and identity. You see that in the woke movement all the time. Very rigid thinking, and you see it in the current presidential election with President Trump. You either love him or you hate him. It's black or white. It's one or the other. Why? Why can't he just be a flawed man that has some good traits and some bad traits? You know, even Joe Biden, who overall I don't like. Kamala, I won't even touch that because I don't know her good traits. But Joe Biden, actually, if you looked at some of his foreign policy decisions, other decisions, I agreed with some of what he was doing. I disagreed with a whole lot. But I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and just, black or white. This person's horrible. This person's great. But we see that all the time in our society. Or there's certain movements, like the woke movement. You say the slightest thing off, we're going to construe it in the worst way possible. And all of a sudden, you're a racist. That's super rigid thinking because no one's perfect. And honestly, everyone, we evolved in ancient times in tribes. So everyone has this tribal thinking. And it's funny how people who call others racist are themselves actually quite racist. But rigid thinking, it causes so many problems in our society. I see these tough guys who tend to have these very rigid mindsets. You must go to the gym. You must be a fighter. You must make $1 million, all this other stuff, or you're a loser. Like very black and white, thinking. Oh, you view porn, you're a loser. That one thing defines you as a loser, That is rigid thinking. That's a rigid mindset. And I've seen these tough guys undergo adversity and absolutely break in half and just lose their shit, over stuff they shouldn't. So we'll keep going. Any comments?
Let's see, what do I want to riff off of for that one? I have noticed, like, I was watching a Simon Sinek video. He was being interviewed of why it works when you have an influencer saying, you have to do this, or you're
simple.
You're a loser. And his analysis was it works because that's, if you're not like, it's, people will already feel like, guys will already feel like a loser. And so if you meet them where they're already at, versus if you tell somebody they're great, and they're worthy, and they don't believe that already, then it like there's a clash with their mindset and their subconscious programs. But if you tell them they're a loser,
it's a match for them.
Right, it's a match. And then the argument is you can help pull them out because you've met them where they are and say, listen, I was a loser too. I was here, but I was able to do these things, and it helped pull me out.
Yeah.
But the problem with that, again, is you're looking for external traits and you're looking for external validation.
Yeah, follow my program, then you won't be a loser anymore. But the truth is that's a belief system. Feeling you're a loser is a belief system.
And especially when that program has probably actually helped the coach, if you want to call them that, themselves. And so they have some amount of investment in their methods working because they
100%.
have, but they haven't really changed the underlying subconscious issues. And so that's always
go ahead.
Yeah. It's just that layer, that subconscious layer is you can't ignore, and it's very I think it's very predictable to watch certain people collapse and certain people rise up. It's not a surprise when we see it. It's like, well, did he, this person have healthy mental model? Well, I know you don't like that term, subconscious programs or not.
You can say mental model. It's cool.
But so yeah, we can keep going on the video.
I will riff off of what you just said.
Okay.
because a lot of people here are looking for life coaches and other types of coaches to help them, and that's why they're watching our channel. They want to be helped too. There are some truths that are universal, but there's way more stuff that depends on your situation. So yes, it's true. Every person will die without oxygen, for example. But with that said, like you look at the no fat movement and some people swear by it. And other people say, I tried it and I didn't fat for a month. And all I could think about was getting my rocks off, and I couldn't focus or concentrate, and I didn't feel better. And one thing I will say is, if you see any so-called coach that says everyone needs to do this exactly the same way, you need to do this, 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 and if not, you're a loser or whatever, that's a coach whose solution will work for probably a minority of people. And then there's other people that approach won't work at all for, because those people are different. So that coach may say, hey, this worked for me, it's going to work for everyone. And it's like, no, it won't, because there's different personality types. Some people grow up in an environment where everyone's pushing them down, criticizing them, and the mindset they adopt is, I'm going to show these people that they're full of crap and that I am worth something, and then they go out and they become very successful. That's maybe 20% of people do that. The other 80% end up getting depressed, anxious, feeling terrible about themselves, and then all these maladaptive behaviors. They start, overeating, gaining weight, or they get into various addictions, or they become heavily codependent, or, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, the people who say, I'm going to prove everyone wrong, they can become very successful, but they were still abused and they still have trauma in them that is holding them back. So what I'm getting at is different people respond differently to the same system, the same stimuli. That, that's just a universal truth. And what this lady is saying is, she's talking about something a little different. She's talking about, hey, your belief system, if all of a sudden something in the outside world comes your way that your belief system is not a match for, it does not account for, it worked in the past, but here's a brand new situation, and you're not willing to adapt, then that's going to, some people will crack and break. Just like that big, strong tree, it was inflexible, it cracked and broke. The smaller, flexible tree survived the hurricane and didn't crack and break. So there's that, but there's also this flip side that we're talking about, this other aspect. Rigid thinking, it invariably causes problems. So we'll keep going with this this video here. And this lady makes a lot of really great points. So we'll keep going.
That causes frustration and anxiety. So what's the opposite of this? Flexible thinking. People with flexible thinking can see things from many different perspectives. They learn from mistake. They take risks. They adapt to constantly changing environments. And isn't our environment constantly changing? Do you know how hard that is for someone with rigid thinking? Because things are always changing. So someone who doesn't want something to change is like that tree. They're going to snap at some point. Whereas you're like that little tree, you just go with the flow. This is what people with flexible thinking do. They just go with the flow. They say, okay, well, this happened. I guess we better do this now instead of that. This, they're willing to listen to other people. They accept other people's preferences. That's not a problem. Oh, really? That's how you think? That's interesting. I had never thought of it that way. This flexibility leads to openness. It's so many areas of your life. So you can see that rigid thinking versus...
It leads to openness and progression and learning because you're open. Closed people don't learn. They just stay where they're at.
Flexible thinking, one is a lot better than the other because one causes suffering and the other one causes a lot more joy and happiness in your life. So if you have rigid thinking, what can you do in your life to start to change that? Well, how about Try new things. If you're very rigid and you have to do the same thing all the time and you don't want to try anything new because it's scary, I don't think I'm going to like it, try something new just for the heck of it. You never know. My father-in-law had very rigid thinking. He was almost 97 years old when he passed away. But his favorite place in the world was Disneyland. And anytime that he would want to get the family together, it was, let's go to Disneyland. Everybody go to Disneyland, go to the same time, the same rides, the same restaurants. Everything had to be the same. One day I asked my husband, well, how about we go to Knott's Berry Farm this time? That might be kind of fun. Oh, no. It had to be Disneyland. So even though his thinking was rigid, he was a wonderful man, but everything had to be done according to the way. And, that only happened really with Disneyland, but everything had to be just a certain way. And that caused him probably a little bit of anxiety if things were to change slightly. So try new things, okay? How about mixing things up a little bit?
Why do you think some people get in their rut and just resist change? It has to be a certain way. Why do you think that is?
Well, sometimes it can be intentional. So, I'll play some devil's advocate and say, if you do the same things over and over again, your variables are all predictable, and then the things that really matter, you can spend less brain power on the things that are that are routine.
You're used to it
and are similar, and you can spend more brain power in more useful other areas. So there's something to be said for that.
Some routines are okay. I mean, that's kind of how our mind works. Is we get used to routines, and then those routines are in our subconscious. We don't even worry about it, and then we use our conscious mind for other stuff, unburdened by the stuff that's familiar.
Yeah. So at the same time, but life typically isn't rigid. Life typically requires more flexibility to be. You're going to have
so much stuff. Life's incredibly complex.
You're going to get into a car crash. You're going to get sick. You're going to get, I don't know. You'll have
or your industry changes and there's no jobs anymore, and you need to get a new
you'll get laid off. You get fired. So if you don't, you need to be rigidity is helpful if you're trying to be really productive in something. I mean, too much chaos. It's always a trade-off. Inevitably, too much chaos lowers your productivity overall because you're trying to make everything go, back to normal. I think our brains like to be in a state of routine. It helps us, identify. It's like, okay, these things aren't threats, so I can look for other things.
Threats is good because this really is about a lot of people feel when they're constantly in their familiar, in the comfort zone, that they're safe. A lot of people and this is actually just part of how our brain is wired. Everyone, and this is just a fact, everyone is motivated towards the familiar, and we have some resistance much of the time to certain unfamiliar things. It shouldn't be a really high resistance. If it is, that's a sign there's trauma or a maladaptive subconscious program to clear. Feeling unsafe, that is that's one of the 5 types of subconscious trauma. I don't feel safe. If you actually aren't safe, you should feel unsafe. But there's times when people are almost completely, if not completely safe, or if there's a risk, it's just a small risk, it's totally manageable, and yet they feel unsafe. So that's where there's and maybe they use a rigid mindset to counter that feeling. But if you never adapt at all, we're all about good habits, getting into good grooves. But if you never adapt at all when life changes or when a curveball is thrown your way, you could break, you could crack.
The way I like to look at it, I was thinking about this actually yesterday, is like, if you imagine your beliefs are kind of, over time, your beliefs are kind of like a line. and your actions are kind of another line that kind of oscillates around that line. And so if you kind of think of like a sine wave, but like going, like being, what's the right term? Like, is it juxtaposed over like a straight line? And so you're going to have some
line. That's maybe a rigid expectation, where in reality, life is kind of like that.
Well,
is that what you mean?
Not exactly. So I'm more talking about your actions are going to gravitate around that line. So your beliefs. So you might get knocked off, okay, maybe I'm sick for a week and I can't work out. It's like, well, okay. But generally, my behaviors are going to gravitate back towards, working out and being healthy. So, or maybe I'm away on vacation for a week and I don't have access to my usual tools. But when I come back, I get right back on the horse and I keep going. And so your beliefs, and so the reason why it's important to have really strong subconscious beliefs is because beliefs that align towards your goals that work with you, is because, because of the chaos of life, that you get knocked around, you have this thing happens, that might push you away from your goals. You'll generally gravitate always back towards those things that are important. And so, and that's
what if, however, your goals as you go through life, what if you discover those goals are actually not ideal later on? You thought that it was what you wanted, you discover it's not.
Well, I would say that's not necessarily inconsistent, because then you're still doing the thing you want. If the generally belief is, maybe go a layer deeper. If generally the belief is, I'm always going to do, I'm worthy to get what I want, and I'm worthy to pursue whatever I want. And I may discover externally that the goals change, but the underlying belief is I'm always going to go after what I want and what's important to me. Then if it's goal A, goal B, doesn't matter, because I know that at the end of the day, I'm going after exactly what I want, because that's the core belief.
That's flexible.
Exactly. Back to tying all nicely back to, I see what you did there.
Well, see, the line is our expectation. This is a goal. This is where I expect to get. What if the goal changes? Or what if you discover my goal is not the optimum path? That where I thought I should be going is not ideal. So I'm a big fan of reassessing and changing. By the way, Gabriel, totally off topic, my man, the Pennsylvania shooter. But by the way, I really, really, really doubt he was MK Ultra trained, because he sucked. He really got lucky, man. If you look at all the analysis, the cops were hot on his trail. There was the reason he missed Trump is there was a cop climbing up the roof and fell off the roof when Crooks turned around and pointed the gun at him. But he shot when he shot, because he's like, the cops are here. And he slipped through. It was also the Secret Service did a terrible job. They absolutely did. They didn't even go to their 9 a.m. meeting. So totally off topic, but
you don't need mind control necessarily to.
Crooks got really lucky, and he was really amateur, and he was a bad shot, and he was using a crappy gun that was a really low level basic AR-15 type gun. And it was just a comedy of errors that he got to where he got, and incompetence.
I think if
he was MK Ultra, he would have been a better shot, and it would have been better planned out, way better planned out. Anyways,
you don't really need mind control in that. You just need to find somebody who just wants to do something bad. You don't necessarily need to. You don't need to like mind control them necessarily. I think it's.
What was the motivation? Who knows? And the motivation was he didn't like Trump, but who knows? Anyways, pretty off topic, but I like to answer comments. So what the heck?
Maybe next week we'll.
Listen, I will tell you a guy I had a session with, and this guy was he was born in Scotland and raised in Scotland, brutally bullied. And because of his being brutally bullied, there's a lot of especially brutal bullying in Scotland, kids growing up. Because of that, he found safety in adopting this warrior code. He's like, no matter what anyone does to me, I'm following this warrior code, and I have value because that makes me this samurai warrior type he adopted that code. So he adopted this very rigid mindset to keep himself safe. Hey, if I follow this code, I have honor. So I'm not a loser. And he literally adopted that code. But when I did a session for him, he was a personal trainer. And yeah, he had a great physique, really good physique. He was very disciplined. But his warrior code meant there were certain things he couldn't do. He was dead ass broke. And there was someone who said, hey, I'll pay you. I can pay you $50 a session twice a week. That's $100 a week. He needed the freaking money. But he's like, well, here's my posted price. And that would go against, he was inflexible. And it's like, dude, take the money because you don't have any money. He wouldn't do it. He's like, this goes against, and he literally talked about how it went against his warrior code. And I spent 7 hours on a session with him, and some things I did help. There was a lot I just flat out couldn't help him with because he's like, no, this violates my warrior code. And it's like, all right, you're going to continue to be a broke ass dude who's going to keep suffering because you won't humble yourself just to take money that's not amazing money, but good money that you need. You turn it down and you're broke because it goes against your warrior code. It's like, that is stupid, and so he continues to be broke. He continues to struggle.
And can I ask
I could only help him a very limited amount in hypnosis. I did help him somewhat, but I would literally kept running up against his warrior code of this is how it should be this way and that way. And it's like, all right, you want to stop suffering, you want to become more successful and stop suffering internally, but you don't want to change the belief system that protected you psychologically growing up, but now is doing more harm than good. Wouldn't let it go. And he's still a struggling dude today.
So can I ask you about
like crap.
Specifics about that? So
what's that?
Can I ask you specifics about that guy?
Sure. It's like 2 years ago. I'll remember as much detail as I can.
Yeah. So was there because I think what you said is that he adopted that code to kind of create some order in his life because it was chaotic. And so also it was, hey, if I act honorably, then I have worth, even though I'm getting bullied and all this other stuff. Right. And so was he So he tied his identity to the belief system, and that can be problematic, but go ahead. Right. And was his inner child unable, because I'm sure there's maybe some people in the some clients, this is a common thing with clients we've worked with, or are they able, like when you're going back to work with his inner child, is he kind of like, because the reason he has that code is because of something that happened in his childhood.
To keep him safe.
Right.
Like, and the code keeps me safe.
But even
the code gives me worth.
Because I assume what you tried to do is say, look, if we can go back and provide your inner child the protection back then you can let go of some of the stuff. And so what was his, like, I assume that was kind of how you approached it. Like, what? He didn't even want to go that far. He's like, nope. He didn't. No. So here's the thing, guys. When we do hypnosis, the way we do it, not all hypnosis is super neuroplasticity. Super neuroplasticity is massive change, one shot, like that. That's what we do all day, every day. There's actually 5 requirements to it. I have a 4-part series on the video section of my YouTube channel. Picks apart a present podcast by Dr. Andrew Huberman. We go Dr. Gabor Mate, also Dr. David Spiegel. I'm not sure if I quoted from him, but he talks a lot about this. So we are in the business of rewiring your brain, but we cannot force you to change your belief system. Hypnosis is not mind control. So some people, a small percentage of people come to us and they're suffering and they want to end the suffering, but they're not willing to change what they believe, which is the root of the suffering. So can I ask, he didn't want to go back to his inner child, or he didn't want
he would tell me no. He just said, no, I'm not changing this.
like you would say, hey, tell your inner child this, and he's like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. He's like, that goes against my code. And I'm like, all right, keep struggling. Like he literally didn't want to change. He would tell me, I had another client who attaches his worth to this image of being a high roller, of being a baller. He's attaching his financial success to his worth. And he was unwilling to let go of that. He crafts a lot of what he does in the business world over this image he projects to the world. So he gets more clients and all this other stuff. And I tell him, I told this guy, as long as you attach your value to how much money you make, you're always going to be insecure, because the truth is you can be doing really well for a year and then the next year something happens and you make no money for whatever reason. It happens. Yeah. It happens all the time. And so if you're a loser when you're not making money and you're fantastic when you are, but you insist on saying, hey, I'm this high roller and that's why I'm so awesome. And honestly, I've had years where I've made a lot of money, well into the multiple six figures. I've had a couple of years like that. I've had very extended periods where I was over 150,000 a year, like 7-8 year period. And it does feel good. But if that is a requirement for your self-worth and you're like, no, I have to be successful, that's attached to my identity, and you don't want to let it go. You don't want to consider that, hey, listen, if you lose everything, you still have value. Thomas Edison had value before he invented the light bulb. It's what kept him going, and through all the failures, thousands of failures, he kept going because he had value, because he had positive traits. And even if you don't have some of these traits right now, if you're a person who's undisciplined, if you're a person who doesn't have a lot of skills, guess what? You still have value, because if you are willing, you can develop those skills. You can build that discipline. The potential of humans, if we are only willing to try and experiment. And by the way, most of the time when someone starts on a path, I'm a businessman. I've had 4 businesses, 2 are successful, 2 failed. One failed a long time ago, and just recently I had a roofing company and the majority owner died. So it went under and it sucked. But business people absolutely have to be flexible, and in life you have to be flexible, because your life rarely turns out how you plan. We can't predict the future. And if things go a different way than you expect and you're not willing to adapt to this new situation, you're probably screwed. And I see people with these rigid mindsets and they struggle. They absolutely do. And they fail to progress. They fail to learn. They fail to learn anything outside of their mindset. I'm not going to do that because, I'm a tough guy and that's what losers do, or just whatever it is. There's so many examples. They're holding themselves back and they are perpetuating their own suffering by being unwilling to let go. I used to have a rigid mindset growing up. I also had very bad manic depression. Not a coincidence that I had both.
And also add, that's good. And also add, there's a difference between having a rigid mindset and having discipline.
True.
There's a big difference. And so having a rigid mindset is like, I can be disciplined and I want to have this, like, just because you're rigid doesn't mean you don't do the same things over and over again. So like if I'm trying to do a workout plan or a weightlifting plan, you're going to be doing the same things over and over and over again. That's not you being rigid. That's you being, you're trying to achieve a very specific result. But, if you, now where you might encounter rigidity is if you get injured, is if you don't have the results you want. and it's clear that this program isn't working, and you still do this thing over and over again, even though all the evidence is pointing this isn't going towards your goals.
Or I have seen guys where their workout system slowly is causing problems with their health. There's this really famous bodybuilder, I think it's Ronnie Coleman, and his bones are just absolutely wrecked from too much weightlifting. I've seen people overtrain and strain themselves, but they keep going even when it's counterproductive to their health.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's almost an addiction at that point.
Yeah, and they're hurting themselves. They're like, well, and they
Right.
keep on doing what they're doing, even though it's hurting them. That is a rigid mindset. You keep doing things the same way, even though it's hurting you because you're unwilling to change. Maybe it was ideal for a while. And then something new happens. You're starting to get stress fractures or just whatever. You're starting to get tendonitis, and you keep pushing yourself. I'll push myself through the pain, but it keeps getting worse. And then you have long-term injuries. Good job.
Right.
Right.
And so I think the key with this is if your underlying belief needs to be, I am someone who is worthy of leading a healthy lifestyle. And that means I am also worthy of figuring out what is that healthy lifestyle I want to lead. Do I want to be on, carnivore? Do I want to be on keto? Do I want to be, I don't think, I wouldn't do this, but vegetarian.
And that's the thing, like carnivore and vegan, like everyone should be carnivore, or everyone should be vegan. That is rigid mindset. Rigid mindsets are incredibly common in our society. There have been vegans who died from the vegan diet. There have been vegans who died from the vegan diet.
I've also heard there's more ex-vegans than there are current vegans, but
because they're malnourished, because there's certain, I think vitamin B17 or B12.
There's certain
you cannot get it from flaxseed oil. Sorry.
Yeah.
You need to get it from animal products that they can take a supplement, whatever, but the bioavailability of protein in plants is way lower than bioavailability of protein in from animals. Going low fat, affects your ability to absorb and use vitamins. Yeah. So, they have this 95-5 or 80-10-10. It's 80% carbs, 10% fat, 10% protein, and they will stick to that. Unhealthy.
Yeah. And so you have to
they'll be unhealthy rather than change their belief set. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and for me, grains seem to affect me more negatively than I can't eat. I love rice, but I make the joke, I love rice, it doesn't love me back. But but other people aren't like that, and so
exactly.
But my underlying belief and another person's underlying belief could be, we're going to lead a healthy lifestyle. For some people, that might include rice. For me, it doesn't. But that's the underlying belief is still what is best for my health and my gut microbiome, and so you want to be rich, and so I guess and that's why I think this is a good topic, because we have to be really specific about what beliefs are rigid and what aren't. And so if you have a really solid, I hesitate to use the word rigid, but a very solid belief that I am good enough no matter what, if that's your underlying, let's say, rigid belief, then that anchors you, that allows you to be flexible in other areas. So
there are a few things that are good for everyone, such as oxygen and clean water, right? And the belief system, I'm good enough just for who I am. I have value just for who I am. I don't need to do or say anything to have this value. I just have it. And the more I do anything, the better I get. That's pretty much universally true. The more we do something, the better we get at it. That's how people practice. You practice playing the guitar. The more you do it, the better you get. That applies to almost everything in life. So there are some things like that, but there's so many things where the situation may change or your belief system isn't serving you. You think it is. Maybe as a child it is. There's a lot of belief systems help kids survive as children, but as an adult, now they're in a different environment. They're not with their abusive parents anymore. And that belief system now holds them back. That's very, 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 very common.
And if you're watching this now, comment in our live chat. What are some other examples? We'll keep going on the video, but comment if you can think of some other examples of rigid versus flexible thinking. If you'd like us to discuss, we can, we like to get audience engagement. If you have ideas for us to discuss about what's rigid versus what's flexible. So,
by the way, P-Dubs, welcome to the show. Gabriel, thank you for the comments. We like engaged audience. You got questions, even if it's about the school shooter, I will briefly address that. Just don't troll me. If you troll me, I'll just kick you off, whatever. But here we go. Moving on. All right. Boop. Here we go.
If you do 1, 2, 3 every day in the same way, how about 2?
What's up?
Now that you froze for
3, 1. How about 3, 2, 1? Just try something else in a different kind of way, which kind of segues a little bit to the first one. How about you force yourself to listen to someone else's point of view? Don't immediately shut them down. Someone's point of view could have a lot of valid points. Don't get so stuck in your psyche and the way you think that you can't hear anything else. So listen and force yourself to maybe do a little research on it, find out about it. Maybe that person has a point of view. Maybe they're going to teach you something. And part of growing in life is to learn new things all the time. You don't want to be stagnant. You don't want to just know what you think you know and believe that is your truth and stick to that for the rest of your life. That is not growth. You're not going to grow in that way. You grow by listening to new things, reading new things, learning different ways of doing stuff that you've never done before. That's how you grow. And then you add to the arsenal of your life experience. You want to be multifaceted. You don't want to be the same way, do the same things, and talk the same exact words that you do all the time. That's rigidity. Now,
okay, so she's making a good point here. I will say, I think it's pretty evident if you watch some of my videos. I've said, Andrew Tate exhibits signs of being a sociopath. I think on the whole, he's not a good person at all. But I actually did a video where he talks about having boundaries with women. And I said, this is great. So we did a whole video on how it was awesome, his way of approaching this one situation. He said, listen, if a girl does X, Y, Z, I'll just tell her, I'm not going to take you seriously or consider you as a long-term girlfriend, but you can do that. And he said it so well, we had a show where we're like, that's great. That's a good way to do it. I think I don't know him personally. But from what I've seen, Tom Cruise, some of his stuff is kind of crazy that he does with Scientology and whatnot. But we did a show where he really held frame in an interview, and he handled it in a very mature, assertive, strong alpha way, good way. We did a show praising him. I've criticized Myron Gaines. I've also, for Impression Fit, I've also did a video where I'm like, man, he nailed it here. He absolutely nailed it. President Trump, I'm more pro-Trump than con, but I've heard, some of these progressive woke people and a lot of their opinions. I'm like, just, you guys are nuts. But some of what they say about Trump is true. He does lie. He does go overboard sometimes. I think he's tough as nails, and he needs to be in the environment he did business in New York City. So it's kind of a his behavior is a kind of or his mindset is both a pro and a con, because sometimes he could be pretty rude and abrasive to people. So even though overall I like a lot of his policies, I don't agree with. I think some of his policies are bad. Why do you think, Jordan? Why does it seem that some people will just look at one or two things a person does and just automatically judge them? This person's a loser across the board, or this person's awesome, and they'll even ignore the bad things that awesome person does, they'll ignore that. They'll sweep that under the rug. And that's rigid thinking too. Would you agree? And why do you think people do that?
It's harder. It's easy. It's easier to just take.
It's easier to simplify it and then just say,
it's much easier to simplify it. And I think that's a deep.
But it causes problems, doesn't it?
Well, yeah. It's almost like it's much simpler. That's why it's like if using, our brains are very efficient.
Yeah.
So if we can just sort people into one category or the other, it's a lot.
Now I can forget about it.
Yeah, it's a lot less thinking we have to do. If we have to like think about the intricacies of an issue, sometimes there's not a very like that's just it's harder. I mean, I think it's really that simple. It's a lot easier to just simplify people into a negative or positive box.
I constantly see content creators on YouTube oversimplify stuff. Way oversimplify stuff. Oh, the 3 things you need to do for this, the 8 things you need to do for this. And it's like 8 things for one person, but 3 of those 8 don't work at all for other people, but they want to say it works for everyone. It's just simpler that way.
Yeah. And like, I think that, well, I've gone back and forth about this. Like, I think people long form podcasts have exploded in popularity. And that to me indicates that perhaps people are better at listening to complex ideas than they are at like reading. And so I think that people can't, I don't think it depends on how they're taught. If you're taught to think about how to think about an issue deeply, then I think that can be your natural response. Versus, because like everything you just described, you talking about, well, this person has some good and bad. I think you're just trying to be objective about your opinion. You're trying not to be like, look, because but if that's how you've been kind of trained to think, then it's almost easier to do that. Because it's like, well, you can't just oversimplify it. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had people. I mean, I have the engineering mind, right? And so I've had people. You're saying, oh, you're overthinking it, or it's like, well, maybe you're just underthinking it.
That's true. And it's a matter of prioritization. Some stuff is not that important to us, and we'll just say, okay, I'm not going to focus on that. But hey, if you want to hear my opinion, it's this, and the opinion's totally wrong because we did oversimplify, but it's not worth that much brain power to really look at it objectively. So put it in a category, shove it aside. I think everyone does that, and that's it is what it is, and it's okay because we do that to stuff that's not too important to us. But when you oversimplify things that are important to you, that really do affect your life, that could be a big problem. So
there's 2 schools of thought, I guess. One is the more deeply you analyze your own beliefs, one of the fear is you realize that your beliefs were wrong, and that's scary, and so you just don't want to go down that route to begin with. Or another thought is if the more you analyze, like some people, I like this show EFAP on YouTube. It's the show where they break down, but it's every frame a pause, and they break down movies like almost every frame, right?
Yeah.
So some people criticize them. They say, well, if you break down a movie, like don't you lose some of your enjoyment if you try and find all these plot holes and inconsistencies and stuff? And their argument is no, it's the opposite. I said, you are able, if you can appreciate a work of art more when you break it down and it's internally consistent as you go smaller, then you can appreciate you're
seeing all the layers and all the work that went into it, and it's a more rich experience. Yeah, I experienced that. When I got professional musical training, I actually have a bachelor's degree in music and sound recording.
Oh, really? No shit. I didn't know that.
The more I got into that, the more I learned about it, the more I enjoyed the music, because I started picking up on all this nuance and all these things going on I didn't pick up before. Yeah. Gabriel, why would supposedly the richest and smartest man in the world not only endorse him, but contribute millions of dollars to Trump? That would be Elon Musk, I believe. And
why?
It's interesting because Trump wants to get rid of the electric vehicle mandate, which the electric vehicle mandate would actually, help Elon Musk, because then everyone has to go to electric vehicles. Elon Musk is a complicated guy. He has his good and bad sides, but at his core, I really do believe that he's trying to benefit humanity. And the far left progressive woke ideology is that Biden and Kamala Harris espouse very radical. And one of the things, for example, is they say car manufacturers can only, by 2030, can only manufacture EVs. They're actually forcing this mandate is in effect right now. Trump said on day one as president, he will get rid of that mandate. And they are the whole green technology movement. Now, I'm all for green technology when it works, solar power, wind, all of that. But we don't have anywhere near the technology needed for green technology to fill all our energy needs. Not even close. And let's say by 2040, all vehicles on the road are EVs, and they can only produce EVs 2030 on. Our electrical grid would be an absolute mess. It'd be an absolute nightmare, because we do not have the infrastructure to support charging all these electrical vehicles. We just don't have it, and we won't by 2030. And I think Elon sees that. Elon does want to advance humanity. He gets his rocks off on that. So good for him for that. I've heard he's very demanding boss. I heard he's somewhat narcissistic. Same thing with Trump, somewhat narcissistic. But I do think they want to, as a net positive, be a net positive for humanity. I do think that. I find purpose and meaning and satisfaction and fulfillment by doing a show, helping people. I have people come to me all the time, do one session, and their lives are forever changed. It is so freaking cool. It is like the most awesome thing on this planet. Jordan, Tim, me, Jordan's doing stuff for free for me right now to help advance his cause. And, the goal is then to, my business to grow enough to give him a job, more hypnosis clients. So, but he's doing this. You could just be an engineer. You can spend all this extra time. My last job made almost 200 grand a year. I could spend all that time just enjoying life, but we do this because it is fulfilling to advance. Once you start making really good money, what are you going to do now? You got your Porsche, you got your luxury apartment. I had those things. I sold my Porsche. I'm in Mexico City. I like better where I am now. The Porsche was fun. But once you get all that stuff, what are you going to do now? Life gets, you start thinking, is there anything more? Because Elon Musk can retire now and spend the rest of his days trying to spend all of his money, and he just couldn't do it. You just can't enjoy that much money. He can live in 5-star hotels every night the rest of his life, travel all around the world. He'd never spend all of his money. So what's next? And you get used to it. What's next?
Yeah.
Well, feeling you have a mission and purpose in life, advancing the human race, is it's probably one of the best feelings we can have. In a way, we are a little bit like sharks. If we don't keep moving forward or moving towards something, I won't say we die, but kind of our soul dies a little. So we all need purpose and meaning. It's what gets us up out of bed in the morning. It's what gives life meaning. Otherwise, we have no meaning. So I think Elon, at the end of the day, is trying to advance the human race. I think he has flaws. I think he could be a total a-hole to some people. Maybe he pushes his workers too hard. Whatever. He trolls.
He dated Amber Heard.
Yeah, so not a perfect guy. But I think he's trying to be a net positive for humanity. And the far left policies of my business partner who I did the roofing company with, he owned a surveying company for oil and gas exploration, and they brought in a couple million a year, and they were doing quite well. And Biden comes in, and his business within 3 months goes to zero because all the oil companies are like, man, you know, they're not building any new refineries. Anytime the gas prices are high, you look at the gas prices at the pump, it's the green initiative. They're trying to shut that down. And they do overemphasize global warming. If you look at the reports the scientists use, the scientists always take the most extreme data and present that as the norm. That's because global warming, climate change has been politicized. Anything that gets politicized is going to be a bit of a train wreck. Anyways, I'm not saying there's not global warming or climate change. I'm saying it's been politicized and really screwed up. So,
and I'll say another
thing. They are pushing an agenda that is going to lead us to economic ruin, and Elon sees that. That's why he's supporting Trump, because Trump's like, listen, man, drill, baby, drill. That's going to bring gas prices down, which brings inflation down because all these products need to be shipped. You build a house, guess what? That wood and all that stuff needs to be shipped to the house. And so prices are going. You want to know why housing prices are so high? Because these stupid cities have these incredibly strict zoning and construction permitting requirements that make it extremely hard, especially in places like Seattle, California, make it extremely hard to build a new home. So that new home is going to cost you $500,000 that you can't afford because basically they're assholes. Because they have their rigid mindset, right? They're not adapting. You know, you see that happen in government all the time. So
so I'll tie it back to belief systems as well. And so if
I got off on a big tangent, but hey, you asked, man.
I'll try and bring us back home. So
Trump's not perfect. He does bad stuff too. So it's
when you have an ideology that is, you know, the reason. So we talked about rigid mindsets, right? We notice that the left will often eat its own. They will often.
Oh yeah.
I've been thinking about why this is the case, and I think the reason is because
the ideology is more important than humanity, than human beings.
You can't. Yeah, and I wonder, like, if you can't give yourself validation, if you haven't learned how to do that, if you don't have the subconscious beliefs in order to do that, and then some other authority figure comes along and says, you're a good person if you believe this and this and this, we're going to save the planet, you have value because we believe in this thing, and you know, gender, race, sexuality, climate, you know, whatever it is, and basically you're dangling the carrot of validation over these people, saying you're a good person if you believe these things, and I'm an authority figure, I'm from the government, and you're good enough if you believe these things. You're not gonna question those things. You're not gonna, because you're only good enough if you
Kool-Aid, you won't. Yeah,
right. And we only give you that validation of being good enough if you believe all of these extreme things, no matter what. And so I suspect that there's a lot of people that are being driven by this need for external validation through authority, telling, and that's why it's like, you wonder why these people can suddenly shift what they believe on a dime. They believe seemingly contradictory things. But the reason they can believe contradictory things, you're missing the point. It's like, because all you have to do as an authority figure is dangle the carrot of validation. Say, just believe these things no matter what, even if they don't make sense, even if they're even if their goals.
Now you belong to the tribe. Now we accept.
Exactly.
You. Yeah.
They want to. You're good enough for the tribe. You're good enough for other people, right? If you just believe these things, then you realize it's not about the idea themselves. It's about it's just about control. And the easiest way to control people is tell them they're good enough if they believe these things. So it's not about the ideas. Like, we have to stop thinking that this woke ideology is about the idea. It's not about the ideas themselves. It's about just the group think and the group control these authority figures have over all these people. And so that's why people can believe perfectly contradictory things and not even think about it. It's because that's not the point. The point is they feel like they're good enough. And that's why I kind of don't always like it trying to like dunk on the libs. That approach isn't.
I think the libs have some good points.
But I find that it's unhelpful because you're missing the point as to why they believe what they believe. They believe it. They want so badly. They need so badly to have this external validation because they can't give it. That's why it's harder. I think that's why it's harder to. Why do you think there's so much infighting in the conservatives? Is because it's a lot harder to dangle the carrot.
Because ideology above all, and you went against their rules, and now they're going to eat you.
But I think that conservatives are generally better at giving themselves internal validation, and so it's a lot harder to control. Like as a group,
maybe a little better,
harder.
Not much better.
Well, I noticed
a little bit, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I guess we could do another show on that, analyzing it. But I've noticed that, like, there is groupthink in both. But I've noticed that it seems to be the Republicans seem to be a lot more fractured than the Democrats are, and I think that's because the Democrats are better at utilizing group identity and feeling like you're good enough to be part of the group than the Republicans are. But we can, again, perhaps we digress away from the subject today. But it's a little
the point I want to make,
rigid thinking.
The majority of human suffering is caused by our belief systems. And if you are emotionally suffering, or you're not where you want to be in life, what you're doing isn't working, be willing to take a look at your belief systems and adapt and change and let go of anything that doesn't serve you. If you're not willing to do that, then you will continue to suffer. That's just the bottom line. And if your belief system is faulty, and then you're put in a new situation where all of a sudden you're struggling and that belief system's not working for you, if you hold on to that belief system, you may end up breaking. The universe is like, we are the waves, the universe are the rocks. A ship is inflexible. A ship runs up against the rocks, you have a shipwreck. The water is flexible. It goes up against the rocks in the ocean, no problem. Because it's Bruce Lee, be like water, my friend. So we'll finish this out. Good discussion today.
Remember what happened to that tree? It cracked, and the tree will crack if it's just stiff.
What's up?
There's no video. You got to put up the video.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. So she's talking about the tree in the hurricane from earlier. The strong, inflexible tree.
That tree, it cracked, and the tree will crack if it's just stiff like this, and something hard comes along, a wind or whatever it is, a trauma, a chaos in your life. It can snap you like that. So learn to just be flowing. Go with the flow, and you're going to do so much better. You're going to have so much joy and so much less anxiety in your life. All right. I hope this was helpful to you. I know it's helpful to me, even though I pretty much go with the flow. Sometimes I could stand to be even more flexible, and I will work on that along with you. All right. If you like this channel, subscribe, turn on your notifications, and look for me next week. Until then, make every moment count. Bye.
All right. Now, I did find the Bruce Lee quote. Bruce Lee, famous martial artist, of course, Hollywood star before he died. Be like water making its way through cracks. Do not be assertive, but adjust to the object, and you shall find a way around or through it. If nothing within you stays rigid, outward things will disclose themselves. be like water. So that's Bruce Lee. Yeah, being flexible, being rigid doesn't make you a tough guy. Some of these tough guys do that. Listen, man, Bruce Lee was a tough guy. He wasn't rigid. He was like water. Be like water, my friends. Be willing to let go of any belief system that doesn't serve you. And if you don't let go of the belief system, be willing to continue to suffer. That's just how it is. So couple final quotes. Majority of our pain caused by our belief systems. That is true. And I said that and you quoted it. Thank you. Gentlemen, your thoughts and words are like honey in my ears. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Gabriel. Appreciate your participation.
Thank you.
Be like water, my friends, so that when you crash upon the rocks, you do not break. Anything else, Jordan?
Yeah, I noticed that, and I think both of us would agree that the best way to, because it's very, one of the thoughts I had when she was first talking is like, is somebody who already has a rigid mindset, are they going to be watching her channel at all? I'm like, maybe, but it's like, it's very easy to just say, like, be open-minded, just don't have it's like, but how do you actually do that? Like, that's a nice thought, but like, how do you actually
you're willing to consider viewpoints you don't necessarily agree with? Oh, on its surface, that's bullshit what that person said. Okay, take a deeper look. Is there a little bit of it that's positive?
But that's but you already think that way. And so I'm trying to think of what can a person do that doesn't, like, you have to evaluate. Again, it goes back to, I think, what we said at the beginning, which was, why do you have these rigid mindsets? Because if you don't, it's very easy to just don't have a rigid mindset. But it's like, yeah, but if you've always had a rigid mindset,
anyone can be willing,
right?
Anyone can say, okay, I'm going to pause and look. I don't agree with this opinion, but I'm going to look at it a little closer, and I'm going to specifically look for any part of it that might be true. Do it as an exercise.
I agree. And my point is, if you have a rigid mindset because you have some beliefs that are protecting you like subconscious beliefs that, it can be difficult. Like, if looking at your own belief system causes pain, if it causes anxiety, then you have to, it goes back to that point about external versus internal validation. If you're looking at your beliefs, if that causes you, if it's like, if you take things personally, if somebody attacks your ideas and you're taking those things personally, you have to ask yourself perhaps why. And if you're not, like, if your beliefs are tied to you feeling like you're good enough, then it's like the things you believe, like, you need those things to feel like you need your beliefs and your ideology or whatever it is to feel validated as a person. And so the best thing you can do is, if you install the underlying belief, I'm good enough no matter what, then it becomes a lot easier to have that fluid mindset and like the open mindset.
Be willing to install that belief system, or be willing to at least say, you know what, I'm going to consider this.
Right.
Is there any merit here? It doesn't mean I have to accept it. I'm just going to look at it and try and not look at, try and keep my judgment to the side and just look at it and be willing to explore.
Yeah.
Is there anything I can learn here?
Right.
And hey, you know what? Are there any examples of people getting benefit from doing things this way? Well, this did work for this guy. This did work. It didn't work for him. Okay, why did it work for this guy and not for the other person? Just be willing, be open to learning, be curious.
Definitely. Vivek Ramaswamy has a good quote about this. He likens it to, like, you should be able to try on a set of ideas like you're trying on a new set of clothes. You see if they fit. You see if, do I like this part? Do I like, how does it fit? How does it feel?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that jacket's right for me, but I'll try it on and look at it in the mirror. And you know what? I'll I'll ask a couple other people's opinion, then I'll look at it again. Okay.
Right. And
That's
underlying
good.
theme is, I can try on these different ideas, but I still feel like I'm good enough no matter what. And so that and also helps you. You're talking about being objective earlier. That helps you be objective. You're like, well, Andrew Tate says some good things and some bad things, but like, he is not, what Andrew Tate's words are not a reflection of how Ryan feels about himself.
Yeah.
And that allows him to
willing
be,
to try
and because
things
of
out.
that, right. And because of that, it helps you be objective. It's like some things are good, some things are not so good. But if your guru or whatever person you're following, if their words are directly, like, if what they say makes you feel good enough about yourself, it's a lot harder to be objective about somebody if they are providing you, if they are the source of your external validation. Like, if they are,
I know what you're getting at, Jordan. If you unconditionally love and accept yourself, then you don't need outside validation. You're not tied to certain belief systems you may get validation from.
right.
And I absolutely 100% agree with that. It does start with even being open to the belief that, hey, maybe I do have intrinsic value. Start there.
That's true.
I will say something else. I used to live in Utah, and I was thinking about moving to Texas. And I'm like, yeah, what if it's too hot there? And my friend's like, well, move there for a year, and if you don't like it, move back. See what it's like. I'm like, good idea. So as long as it's if it's something point of no return, be way more careful about making that decision. But most of our decisions, we can just try stuff out, dip our toe in the water, be willing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's our show for today. Thank you, Jordan. Good clip today. And that's all we have. But listen, if you're willing to try things out, I guarantee you this. I promise you this. If you're willing to try new things out, you will learn new things. And then you will realize what Jordan and I have learned by being willing to try hypnosis, rewire our minds. You'll discover you really do have more power than you know. That's our show. Thank you.